Welcome to Did You Know the Heart of It, a short podcast from Gloria Deo Academy. In each episode, we unpack the heart behind our school's practices and philosophies so we can grow together in our shared mission to raise lifelong worshipers, lifelong learners, and lifelong servants. Whether you're driving, folding laundry, or catching a quiet moment, we're glad you're here. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the tension and harmony between academic rigor and this phrase of laying a feast. And we're here with our head of school, Mr. Joe Fesler. Hi, Mr. Fesler.
Hey, Robin. Thanks for bringing this topic up. This is one that we hear a lot about from our parents, and I'm really excited to dive into this.
Oh, me too. So I have heard about laying a feast. It's something painted a very beautiful visual picture for me as a mom doing home days in our collaborative model, wanting to just lay a feast of a beautiful education for our kids. Can we talk about what is meant by that, laying a feast?
Yeah, I think it's really great. When the first time you heard that phrase, laying a feast, where did you hear that? Where'd you come up with that phrase?
It's used a lot in Charlotte Mason education.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of Charlotte Mason education that does overlap with classical education in books like Consider This. And so as I was reading and my own personal learning and growth with educational philosophy, I continued to come across it. And it just always sounded really beautiful to me and something I wanted for my kids.
Yeah, I think most people hear for the first time, they hear the concept of laying a feast from Charlotte Mason. And that's true. It does come from an educational background, but it even comes before that. It comes all the way back to a biblical worldview. Lady Wisdom in the book of Proverbs lays a feast out before us, and that feast is wisdom. I think actually Charlotte Mason picked up on that concept and made it something like scaled almost in the educational world. And what she meant by that was, how do we provide something rich, nurturing for the soul, abundant for the students in front of us? And so that's the concept of having a feast laid before students. I think you can even have a practical element of that inside of a classroom. How do we offer a wide range of books or content that our students can swim in and really enjoy? So that's kind of the concept of laying a feast for our students.
And we kick off our school year at the beginning of the year with our back to school feast night. And the reason why we come together as a school and we feast to kick off the year, because it comes back to what you're saying with Lady Wisdom and Proverbs.
Yeah, and what I love about that night is it's hot, it's in the evening, there's students running everywhere, parents, and it's almost one of those nights where you're like, should we be doing this in August out here? And yet we do want to start our school year off by reminding everybody we're trying to lay a feast for you and your students.
This is why we're here.
Yeah, I have a question for you on that. Why do you think Scripture, why do you think that concept of laying a feast, why do you think it's so important? Like, what is the foundation for that?
I think it's the beauty of getting to know God and in all of his creation and all the goodness, whether it's math or art or just nature and being out there, that we're laying a feast because these are all different ways that we can engage and connect in knowing the Lord. Yeah,
I love what you said right there. I do believe that there is that element of relationship, and it's a relationship between you and God. And then when it comes to the teachers and students, or even teacher to teacher, it's about a relationship. It is amazing to me that we all want to be known and we want to know. And I actually believe that laying a feast is rooted in the concept of relationship. And most people think of it as just great books or great education, but it's so much deeper than that. We live in a world today where everything is pushing us toward individualism, everything. And yet a proper, good education is one built on relationship, where we kind of move away from the personal and we lay something before someone and see if they want to dine on it, so to speak, to use that metaphor. And so that is really the concept of laying a feast.
You know, as you're discussing that, I can see these images of my own children when I'm laying a feast for them, so to speak, when I'm putting out a bunch of different beautiful subjects for them to connect and engage with. My kids are going to discover things about themselves and in who they are, what appeals to them, what they delight in, what they want to know more about and dive deeper into. And by providing this feast of all these good and beautiful and true things, they're learning more about who they are. And then like we talked about in the Lord's world.
And can I just hit on that for just a minute? I don't know exactly where this will lead us, but you know, that concept of relationship or becoming who you're supposed to become. We can talk about that in a little bit, but it all is coming back to this idea of how do we help people flourish? And in this environment, as a school, how do we help students flourish? Siri knows my name, but Siri knows nothing about me. Whereas our teachers know our students, and they're trying to pull out the greatest capacity out of our students. And so we use the concept of flourishing. How do we help students flourish? How do we help them become all they were intended to become and do all they were intended to do? Well, I think our culture has kind of hijacked that concept of flourishing and made flourishing this concept of how do I help my student have no struggles? That is not the concept of flourishing. Actually, the concept of flourishing goes way beyond that, and it's to become who you're intended to become. And so that requires
a man in his fullest.
Yeah.
Like fullest man.
Yeah, and you can't even become
like
full
virtue,
man. Right?
The Latin for virtue.
That's
We
right.
could dive into this whole different side conversation about becoming to your fullest self.
Right. And so no one becomes their fullest self without struggle, without some kind of difficulty along the way. I think Just Thinking is a book I was reading a while back, and they were talking about 50% of kindergarten through graduate students deal with anxiety and depression. 50%.
Wow.
And this is the generation that almost all the obstacles have tried to be removed from in front of it.
We call that the snowplow.
That's right. Around here, that's exactly what we call it in our interviews and everything else. And so as parents push more and more for that concept of how do I remove the hurdles, it is actually hurting the students and hurting society for that matter. 50% are dealing with anxiety and depression. And so flourishing has more to do with when I encounter something difficult, where do I turn? What do I do? How do I handle it? And I think that what we provide here is that ability for teachers and parents and teacher to teacher. How do we lay a feast before someone and say, here's the greatest books, the scripture itself that helps us understand how to flourish well, even during suffering. Not how do we eliminate it, but how do we flourish well in that?
And so we're going to bring students to the table and help them engage with living ideas that feed their mind, heart, and soul. Sometimes what happens is we have families that they get into this model of education. We're laying a beautiful feast, and we hit that some struggle, like you mentioned. And we hear parents say, that's just so much work. Because instead of seeing the beautiful feast where we're offering opportunities for students to connect with different content and to be inspired by what's in front of them, that they see this long list of subjects and all the things that have to get done. And I just don't think kids need that much rigor. Do they have a misconception? Do these parents have a misconception of what academic rigor is? And how can we help them through that?
When we start dealing with things that are difficult inside of our homes with our kids from an educational standpoint, I'm hoping that our families want to build a great culture at home, just like we want to build a great culture here. We want our teachers to lean into and work with students when something's difficult and say, what should the interactions be? What standard are we going to hold ourselves to when difficult things come our way? We want to stretch students. We don't want to break students, right?
Right.
And part of the reason for that is so that they learn to flourish, so that they can themselves build a great culture around them. Learn to give thanks in all things, even when it's really difficult.
Part of flourishing is the stretching process. To get to flourishing, we've got to be stretched in different seasons of life.
Yeah, and if I had to ask you the question, what do you think, when it comes to our parents, you talk to a number of moms, a number of dads, what do you think the hardest part about that concept of this is too much? What are you hearing? What do you hear from parents?
I think I hear the fear and that they're afraid they're not doing it right because maybe the relationship is struggling. That I hear that they're overwhelmed and tired, and when they're talking to me about this, and they're looking at it up close. They're looking at each day way too up close as opposed to zooming out and keeping the long term, the big picture in mind. That yes, it's hard to grow a garden. It's hard to plant those seeds, to till the soil and wait and water, and it's all the things, but it takes time.
Yeah, that's really good. I've heard those similar phrases. One phrase that I heard a while back was a mom that came and talked to me about their home day, and her daughter was, I think, going to 5th grade, maybe is what it was. And they were talking about withdrawing because the mother was scared to death this was going to ruin her relationship with her daughter forever. And because they were always battling, it was a head-to-head battle. And I sat there and as I was talking to her and trying to understand and listen and have empathy in the situation, my mind kept going, what's the upstream problem? Because there's an upstream problem to this. If pushing your child to do something difficult is
stretching,
yes,
right? Stretching,
right.
Like we talked about.
If that's going to ruin the relationship you have with your daughter, then what's the upstream problem? And as I was sitting there trying to process that, I kept thinking, is the upstream problem that so far in life, I've removed all the hurdles from this child, and if I don't continue to do that for the rest of their life, they're not going to want a relationship with me? And if so, man, that's something we need to figure out how to fix. And if it's, hey, how do I pray and ask God to do a work of the Holy Spirit in my life to connect with this child on a deep level when things are difficult, then that's the upstream problem. But there's an upstream problem to this home day being really, really
especially when there's that fear and overwhelm, a lot of fear in the relationship with our kids.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think God provides those opportunities for us to shape us. He's shaping something in us through the difficulties. And I think when we reject that shaping, we aren't truly growing heart, mind, strength for the glory of God.
Now, there's definitely times when there's academic rigor and maybe a student really is struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't want to say that that's not possible, because it is. And so always reach out to your child's teacher or an armor bearer. That's why community is so important. Because to be in community, to be willing to be open and vulnerable and to learn and grow from each other.
Yeah.
Yes. Like in Proverbs, iron sharpens iron. And so we need each other. And I don't want to glaze over that at all. And so I wanted to bring that up as well. But you also talked about having a culture in our homes, not just a good culture at school of laying a feast, but a culture in our homes. I think as parents, when we can approach whether it's homework and upper grades or collaborative days and grammar school, as we are creating a culture in our home where our students can engage with a variety of subjects in the curriculum that's true, good, and beautiful. And we're not going to be afraid to dig deep when we hit those stretching times where we're being stretched and it's uncomfortable. There's no doubt that there are some grade levels and some seasons that are just uncomfortable, and they're sanctifying for the parents as well. There's something for us to grow and learn in it too. But ultimately, the reason why we do this is because we want to cultivate lifelong learners and lifelong worshipers and lifelong servants.
Yeah.
We want students to find who they are, what their loves and interests are, so that we can nurture that.
Yeah, I don't think that someone can grow in wisdom or knowledge or reach their potential without the concept of being stretched. And that is a painful process. I would love to go through life and have no struggles. That would be wonderful. And yet I often look back at my own struggles in life and think those were the times where I grew the most, and it helps me flourish today.
I really like diving into this concept of that there's a tension and a harmony between laying a feast with this classical education and navigating what some parents might call academic rigor, but just really those uncomfortable stretching and growing times.
Yeah. And to use the same metaphor, if you go to someone's house for dinner, there's often something on the table that you may not like. And it's often those things on the table we don't like that are actually the best things for us.
What encouragement would you give to a family who is learning and growing in this, as far as moving away from a perspective of this is too much work to we're cultivating something beautiful here?
Yeah, I think if I could give any encouragement at all, it would be this, that Andy Crouch in his book talks about the concept of riding a motorcycle and the difference between riding a motorcycle and riding a bicycle. And when you ride a motorcycle, you just push a button and that bike will take you wherever you want to go. When you ride a bicycle up and down hills, every downhill wind in the face moment is bought and paid for by an uphill climb. And if I could give any encouragement to families, it would be this. we need to provide more opportunities for our students to have an uphill climb, because they will truly enjoy the downhill moment. The rewards.
That's the flourishing we
Yes,
talked about.
right. That's exactly right. They will truly appreciate that downhill glide a lot more when they have those uphill moments. But thank you again for doing this. I think it's wonderful. I hope it's beneficial to our family.
Yep, my pleasure. We know that finding a school that partners in discipling your child without compromising your family's values can feel overwhelming. Gloria Deo Academy offers a collaborative, classical, Christian education where your child can authentically live out their faith and thrive academically and spiritually. Find out more at www.gda.academy. Thanks for listening.